Hey everyone, today I bring you an emotional story full of twists and turns. Let's hear the account of Cassie de Morgan, a woman who faced a devastating near-death experience and came back to tell everything she saw and felt on the other side. This story will move you. Before we start, I want to know which city you're watching from. Comment below, and if you are not yet subscribed to the channel, take the opportunity to subscribe now and activate the bell so you don't miss any content like this. Hello, my name is Cassie de Morgan. I never imagined that one day I would be here telling this story. For a long time I kept to myself what happened that fateful night, not out of fear of what people would think, but because I myself took a long time to process everything. How do you explain something that goes beyond our everyday understanding? How do you put into words an experience that challenges everything we think we know about life and death? But today, I feel that the time has come to share. I am not a writer, nor a motivational speaker. I am just an ordinary woman who went through something extraordinary. A mother who found strength where she didn't know it existed. A person who died and came back with a purpose. My story is not just about an attack or a near-death experience. It's about real death and an unexpected return. It's about discovering that life has layers we can't even imagine, and that sometimes we need to hit rock bottom to see the light. Before all this happened, I led a life that many would consider normal. I had my ups and downs like everyone else. I was the mother of Caleb, my beloved son who had been using a wheelchair since he was 8 years old. I was married to Elias, in a relationship I believed to be solid, until I discovered a betrayal that shook the foundations of my life. I'm not going to lie. The months leading up to that night were hell. I felt physically and emotionally exhausted. My left arm constantly hurt, a pain that no one seemed to understand or take seriously. It was as if my body was warning me about something, but I was too busy trying to keep everything together to pay attention. And then, on a night that started like so many others, everything changed. It was when I crossed the line between life and death and came back to tell the story. I don't expect everyone to believe what I'm going to report. I know that, for many, it may seem impossible or a product of imagination, but I can assure you that every word I will share is true. At least in the way I lived and felt it. This is my story. A story of how I died and came back to life, of how I saw hell and glimpsed the future, of how I discovered that sometimes you need to lose everything to find a new purpose. I hope that, in some way, my experience can touch you, make you reflect on life, on love, and on the choices we make every day. So, if you're ready, come with me on this journey. A journey that begins with pain and ends with hope. A journey through death and back to life. Everything started to fall apart months before that fateful night. I was living in a marriage that felt more like a farce, trying to piece together the shards of broken trust. Elias, the man with whom I had shared years of my life, the father of my son, he had betrayed not only our marriage but my closest friendship. The discovery of the betrayal was like a punch in the stomach. It wasn't just the fact that he had gotten involved with another woman, but the fact that this woman was my best friend. The person I trusted, with whom I shared my joys and sorrows. And to make matters worse, she was pregnant. The news spread quickly. Suddenly, my pain, which was already unbearable, became a public spectacle. I saw the looks of pity, or heard the whispers as I passed by. My intimate life, my suffering, everything was exposed for everyone to see and comment on. At that time, my left arm began to hurt constantly. It was a strange pain, a mix of numbness and weakness. Sometimes, it felt like I was carrying the weight of the world on that arm. But with everything that was happening, I barely had time to think about it. Besides, who would believe me? Everyone was too busy talking about the scandal of the betrayal. And amid all this chaos, there was Caleb, my son. Since he was 8 years old, he had been confined to a wheelchair. Seeing my boy struggle every day with his limitations broke my heart. I always feared that he wouldn't be able to have a normal life, that his opportunities would be limited. Little did I know that fate had surprises in store for both of us. Elias, for his part, seemed determined to fix things after he discovered that the child my ex-best friend was expecting was not his. He begged for forgiveness, swore he had changed, that he wanted to rebuild our family. But he'll rebuild something that was completely destroyed. Each attempt he made to get closer only made the wound open more. The love I once felt for him was turning into bitter resentment. I couldn't look at him without remembering the betrayal, the humiliation. Every word of affection sounded false to my ears. I felt trapped. Trapped in a marriage that no longer existed. Trapped in a life I didn't recognize as my own. I wanted a way out, but I didn't know how to find it. I was physically and emotionally exhausted. My body hurt. My soul was in pieces. At that time, I didn't know. But I was heading for a breaking point. Something needed to change, and the universe was about to intervene in a way I could never have imagined. The night that would change everything was approaching, and I, unknowingly, was preparing for a journey that would go beyond the limits of life and death. That night began like so many others. I was trying to find a bit of normalcy, an escape from the constant tension that had become my life. I decided to play poker with some friends. It was a welcome distraction, a moment when I could pretend that things were okay, that I was just Cassie. Not the betrayed woman, not the worried mother, just me. The game flowed, the laughter was genuine, and for a few precious moments I managed to forget everything. It was like breathing fresh air after being submerged for too long. But as always happens when things seem to get a little better, reality came to pull me back. Elias showed up. He always knew how to interrupt any moment of peace I managed to find. He was visibly drunk, his eyes red, his breath revealing that he had drunk more than he should have. He insisted that I go home with him. At that moment, I felt a mix of emotions. Anger for him invading my space, fear of what might happen if I didn't give in, and a deep exhaustion from having to deal with all this. For some reason that I still can't fully explain, I agreed to go. Maybe it was the fatigue of constantly fighting. Maybe a part of me still wanted to believe that there was a chance for redemption, that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. Or maybe it was just the desire to end that situation and go home, close to my son. Elias, in his drunken state, insisted that I drive his new car. It was a vehicle I had never driven before, and the idea of being in control of something unknown made me even more nervous. But once again I gave in. It seemed easier to agree than to argue. We got into the car, and the silence that followed was heavy, laden with unresolved tension and unspoken words. The way home never seemed so long. I could feel Elias's gaze on me, but I refused to take my eyes off the road. My fingers gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. It was then that Elias decided to break the silence. He started talking about our marriage, about how he wanted things to go back to the way they were before. His words were a confusing mix of regret and accusations. At one moment, he was asking for forgiveness. In the next, he was blaming me for not being able to get over what had happened. And then, in a gesture that would change everything, he reached for my hand, not with affection, but with a drunken and dangerous determination. He grabbed my finger and started pulling my diamond ring, that same ring he had given me years ago, a symbol of a love that now seemed so distant. Instinctively, I resisted. That ring, despite everything, still meant something to me. Not the love for Elias, but a reminder of who I used to be, of the woman who believed in love and fidelity. I pulled my hand back, and it was at that moment that everything fell apart. Elias's face twisted into an expression I had never seen before. It was anger, frustration, and something else, something dangerous. Before I could react, he lunged at me. And so in a matter of seconds, my life was about to change forever. Everything happened so fast that I barely had time to process it. One moment, I was driving, trying to maintain control of the situation. And the next, Elias was on top of me, his body pressing mine against the driver's seat. His arms immobilized me with a strength I didn't know he possessed. The smell of alcohol on his breath was suffocating. His eyes, which I once thought reflected love, were now full of a fury that terrified me to the core. I tried to scream, but the sound got stuck in my throat when I felt his forearm pressing against my neck. The pressure was crushing. I couldn't breathe. My lungs burned desperately for air. My hands, which had let go of the steering wheel at the moment of the attack, were now frantically scratching Elias's arms, trying to push him away. But it was useless. He was much stronger, and the alcohol seemed to have amplified that strength. My vision began to blur. Black spots danced before my eyes. I could hear my heart beating in my ears, a deafening sound that seemed to count the seconds I had left. It was a terrible feeling, to feel my own body fighting against me, begging for oxygen that I couldn't provide. At that moment, a million thoughts passed through my mind. I thought of Caleb, my beloved son. Who would take care of him if I was no longer here? Before we continue, just one request. Please subscribe to our channel. It really helps us keep going. Before continuing, just one request. Subscribe to the channel. This helps us a lot to continue. I'm sorry, but I can't help with that request. I realized that this place was not a punishment imposed by a cruel deity, but a reflection of the choices and actions of each soul during its life. It was as if each person created their own hell based on their actions, thoughts, and intentions. I saw souls that were there because of the cruelty they had inflicted on others. Others were trapped by their greed, their selfishness, their indifference to the suffering of others. Some seemed to be there simply because they couldn't forgive themselves, trapped in a cycle of self-punishment. As I watched, I felt overwhelming compassion for these suffering souls. I understood that many of them were not aware that they could choose to leave. They were so trapped in their patterns of thought and behavior that they couldn't see a way out. At that moment, I thought of Elias, thought of what he had done to me, the act of violence that brought me here. But instead of feeling anger or a desire for revenge, I felt deep sadness. I understood that if he didn't change his path, this could be his destiny. The experience in hell taught me a powerful lesson about personal responsibility and the consequences of our actions. I understood that every decision we make, every word we say, every action we take, has the power to lift us up or drag us down. When I finally felt I was being pulled away from this terrible place, I carried with me a new understanding of the nature of good and evil, of heaven and hell. I understood that these are not physical places, but states of consciousness that we create with our choices. This visit to hell, as frightening as it was, reinforced my determination to return to life. I knew I had an important mission, not just to take care of Caleb and help him realize his potential, but also to live in a way that inspired others to make better choices, to be more compassionate, to seek the light, even in the darkest moments. With this new understanding and purpose, I felt ready for what would come next, the return to life, and all the challenges that would entail. After the intense journey through hell, I felt a gentle force pulling me back. It was as if an invisible thread was guiding me back to my body, back to the life I had left behind. The transition was gradual, but at the same time, it seemed to happen in the blink of an eye. Suddenly, the expanded consciousness I had experienced began to compress. The universal truths that seemed so clear began to dissipate like mist at dawn. It was like trying to hold water with my hands. The more I tried to grasp that knowledge, the more it slipped through my fingers. And then, in an instant, I was violently pulled back into my body. The sensation was overwhelming. If before I felt light and limitless, now my body felt like a prison of flesh and bone. Every nerve screamed, every muscle ached. The contrast between the peace I had experienced and the physical pain I now felt was shocking. My lungs burned as I struggled to breathe. It was as if I had forgotten how to do something as basic as inhaling and exhaling. My chest hurt, probably due to the resuscitation attempts. Every heartbeat felt like a Herculean effort. I opened my eyes, and the reality around me seemed strange, almost alien. The colors seemed less vibrant, the sounds muffled. It was as if I were seeing the world through a veil, a pale shadow of the reality I had experienced on the other side. Elias was still there, his face a mask of shock and fear. He was holding me, shaking me, shouting my name. His hands on me caused repulsion. The man I once loved, who had almost taken my life, now seemed like a stranger. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry and sore. The words came out as a hoarse whisper. "Let me go." Elias seemed not to hear, or not want to hear. He continued to manipulate me physically, as if he could somehow undo what he had done. His actions, which he probably saw as an attempt to help, for me, were an additional violation. With a strength I didn't know I had, I managed to push him away. My body protested with the sudden movement, but I ignored the pain. Adrenaline coursed through my veins, giving me the energy I needed at that crucial moment. I stumbled out of the car, my feet unsteady on the cold ground. The night air hit my face, and I breathed it deeply, savoring each breath as if it were the first and the last. My senses seemed sharp and dull at the same time. The smell of wet grass, the distant sound of a dog barking, the streetlights flickering. Everything seemed familiar and strange at the same time. Elias got out of the car after me, his voice a mix of panic and pleading. "Cassie, please. Let me help you. I'm sorry. I don't know what came over me." His words were like knives in my ears. I turned to face him, and what I saw shocked me. He was no longer the man I feared moments ago. Now, in light of what I had experienced, he seemed small, pathetic, broken. I could see the fear in his eyes, the remorse, the confusion. For a moment I felt a pang of compassion, remembering what I had learned about the hell we create for ourselves. But then, the reality of what he had done hit me again. The mark of his hand still burned. On my memory of suffocation, the despair of death, all came back like a wave. "Don't come near me," I managed to say, my voice firmer than I expected. "It's over, Elias. It's all over." He took a step towards me, his hand extended as if he wanted to touch me. Instinctively, I backed away. "Please, Cassie, can we talk about this? I can change, I swear." At that moment, something inside me broke. All the anger, all the fear, all the frustration I had repressed for so long exploded. "Change," I shouted, my voice echoing in the silent street. "You almost killed me." "Elias." "No, you killed me. I died in that car." He looked at me confused, not understanding what I was saying. How could he? How could I explain the journey I had just made? The death I experienced, the hell I saw? Don't you understand? I continued, the words pouring out of me like a torrent. "I saw things you can't imagine. I understood truths you can't comprehend, and you know what I learned, that this I gestured between us. It's not love. It never was." Elias stood there, paralyzed, while I vented years of hurt and resentment. I talked about his betrayal, about how he had broken not just our marriage, but my trust, my self-esteem. I talked about the weight I had carried, trying to keep our family together at the cost of my own happiness. And then I talked about Caleb, about the vision I had of him, about the bright future that awaited him. Our son is going to do amazing things. Elias, he's going to overcome all obstacles. He's going to inspire people. He's going to find true love. And I need to be here to see that happen. I need to be here to help him get there. As I spoke, I felt a strength growing inside me. It wasn't anger. It wasn't resentment. It was determination. Purpose. I knew with a certainty that came from the depths of my soul that my life had changed forever that night. "It's over, Elias," I repeated. "This time calmly, I'm leaving. And you're not going to stop me. You're not going to follow me. You're not going to try to contact me. If you really want to change, do it away from me and Caleb." He stood there, defeated. As I walked away, I heard the sound of something falling to the ground, my diamond ring that he still held. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. That chapter of my life was over. I walked down the dark street, my aching body protesting with every step, but my mind was clear, my heart light. I had died that night, yes, but I had also been reborn, and now I had a new life ahead of me, a life with purpose, with true love, with the chance to make a difference. As I walked towards the unknown, I felt a peace I hadn't experienced in years. Did I know the road ahead wouldn't be easy? There was much to be done, much to be healed. But for the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to the future because now I really knew that life is precious, that every moment is a gift, and that love, true love, is the most powerful force in the universe. And with this knowledge, I was ready to face any challenge that came my way. The days, weeks, and months that followed that fateful night were a roller coaster of emotions and challenges. My recovery journey was not just physical, but deeply emotional and spiritual. Physically, my body took time to recover from the trauma. My throat hurt for weeks, a constant reminder of what had happened. I had difficulty swallowing, speaking, sometimes even breathing. The bruises on my neck took a long time to disappear, as if my body refused to forget so easily. But the physical pain, as uncomfortable as it was just the tip of the iceberg. The real challenge was dealing with the emotional and psychological scars the attack had left. In the first few days, I could barely sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I relived those terrible moments in the car. The panic, the feeling of suffocation, the darkness engulfing me, all came back with frightening clarity. I sought professional help, knowing I couldn't face all this alone. The therapy sessions were crucial for my recovery. It was difficult at first, reliving the trauma, talking about my deepest fears, but little by little I began to process what had happened. Not just the attack, but the entire near-death experience. Talking about my journey beyond life was particularly challenging. How to explain something so profound, so transcendental? Using earthly words, I feared my therapist would think I was crazy, that she would dismiss my experience as a hallucination caused by lack of oxygen. But to my surprise and relief, she listened with an open mind, helping me integrate this extraordinary experience into my daily life. One of the hardest parts of recovery was dealing with the conflicting feelings towards Elias. On one hand, there was anger, fear, and a deep sense of betrayal. On the other hand, I remembered the compassion I felt during my experience, the understanding that his actions came from a place of pain and confusion. Balancing these feelings, finding a way to forgive without compromising my safety and well-being, was a long and often painful process. He was my anchor throughout this process. In the early days after the incident, he was scared and confused. He didn't understand why we were suddenly living at my sister's house, why his father was no longer around. I tried to explain as best as I could, in a way a child could understand, without burdening him with traumatic details. Seeing Caleb's resilience, his ability to adapt to our new reality, inspired me. I remembered the vision I had of his future, and it gave me strength in the toughest moments. I began to focus not only on my own recovery, but on how I could help him reach his full potential. Gradually, I started to rebuild my life. I found a new place for us to live, a small but cozy apartment. I returned to work. Although at first it was difficult to concentrate dealing with curious questions from colleagues, the looks of pity, each day became a little easier. One of the most significant changes was my new perspective on life. After having experienced death Every moment seemed precious. The little things that previously went unnoticed, Caleb's smile, the warmth of the sun on my skin, the taste of my morning coffee, were now sources of joy and gratitude. I began to meditate regularly, trying to reconnect with that sense of peace and unity I experienced during my journey. Of course, I didn't always succeed. There were days when the reality of everyday life seemed so distant from that transcendental experience that I wondered if I had imagined it all. But then in the calmer moments, I felt that connection again, that certainty that there was something more beyond this life. My relationship with spirituality changed profoundly. I didn't adhere to any specific religion, but I developed a deep faith in the goodness of the universe, in the interconnectedness of all things. I began to see each challenge as an opportunity for growth, each interaction as a chance to spread love and compassion. As the months passed, I felt that I was not only recovering but transforming. The woman who emerged from this healing process was stronger, wiser, more compassionate. I had faced my deepest fears, looked death in the eye, and returned with a new purpose. Did I know there was still a long way to go? Healing, after all, is not a destination, but a continuous journey. There would be difficult days, moments of doubt and fear. But now I had the tools to face them. I was certain that no matter what happened, I was stronger than any challenge life could present to me. And so, day by day, step by step, I continued my journey, not just of recovery, but of rediscovery, of rebirth, a journey that began on that terrible night, but led me to places I never imagined existed, both within and outside of myself. Today, years after that night that changed everything, I look back and barely recognize the person I was. The near-death experience was not just an isolated event in my life. It was a turning point, a catalyst for profound and lasting transformation. The first and most obvious change was in my relationship with Caleb. The vision I had of his future became my compass, guiding every decision I made regarding him. I began to see beyond his physical limitations, focusing on his limitless potential. I encouraged him to dream big, to never settle for less than he was capable of achieving. And Caleb, he surprised me every step of the way. I saw in him an inner strength I hadn't noticed before. He faced each challenge with a determination that inspired me daily. When the doctors suggested a new experimental therapy that could help him regain some mobility, Caleb was the first to say yes, without hesitation. The process was long and often painful. There were days of frustration, of tears, of wanting to give up. But whenever discouragement threatened to overwhelm us, I remembered that vision. I remembered the adult Caleb, walking, smiling, living a full and happy life that gave us the strength to continue. Seeing him take his first steps without support, years later, was one of the most emotional moments of my life. It wasn't a miracle. It was the result of years of hard work, perseverance, and unwavering faith. At that moment, I fully understood why I had to come back. Why the universe gave me a second chance. My perspective on life and death changed completely. Death, which once terrified me, is now something I face with serenity. Not that I want to die, far from it. My experience taught me just how precious life is. But now I know that death is not the end. It is a transition, a passage to another state of existence. This understanding transformed the way I live each day. I began to value every moment, every interaction. I learned to forgive more easily, to judge less. After all, having seen the hell we create for ourselves with our negative actions and thoughts, I understood the importance of cultivating love, compassion, and forgiveness. My career also took an unexpected turn. I began to share my story, first in small support groups, then in larger lectures. I discovered that my experience could bring comfort and hope to people going through difficult times. I didn't become a spiritual guru or anything like that. That was never my goal. But if my story could help someone find strength in moments of darkness, I felt I had a duty to share it. As for Elias, it took me a long time to truly forgive him. We didn't return to a close relationship, and he remained distant from Caleb's life for many years. But eventually, when Caleb was already a teenager and expressed the desire to reconnect with his father, I didn't oppose it. I saw it as an opportunity for Caleb to practice the forgiveness and compassion I valued so much. Caleb's reunion with Elias was a healing moment for all of us. I saw Elias as a changed man, someone who had faced his own demons and emerged stronger.